We begin with the 13th session in this workshop, which is around negotiations, closing deals, post-deal contract lifecycle management. We start with a mock negotiation. Sorry. Yes, John Fraser, he will be speaking first. I'll introduce Manisha later on, who will be leading the mock negotiation. We have already introduced John, so let me not take any more time. John and Richard will be part of this session, and Manisha will introduce at that point of time.
All right. I'm going to talk about understanding the activities of a TTO as announced for about 30 minutes. The topics I'm going to talk about are building awareness. In other words, what you do in your office to let people know and be aware of what you're doing. We're going to spend quite some time on effective communications. Fundamentally, I'm going to talk about what it is that you need to do to convince people to finance your office. Otherwise, you're out of a job. Okay? We're going to talk about relationships with inventors, building a pipeline, and effective IP protection and management. I don't know where the slides are, but that's, well, let me click and see. No, I think it's the later stuff. Yeah. All right. First of all, building awareness. Depending on the maturity or age of your program, people that you work with are either aware of or not aware of what you do. Okay? So I'm going to talk about building awareness, particularly creating an outreach program, which is you can sit in your office all day and expect people to come to you, and they will not because they're not aware of what you do, and they're not aware of the benefits to them of working with you. So it's really a matter of communicating and engaging people. So having an outreach program is important, as you all do. Having a showcase of faculty achievements is a good thing. Depending on how you do it, I've always done it and engaged the outside community and the media.
John, I think this session is negotiation and closing the deal. Yeah. The slides are also...
Negotiation, well then.
Yeah. So the slides are put up for the same only.
Well, what's this one then? Okay, so I'm talking about the wrong thing.
Yeah.
All right.
No
Negotiation and closing the deal. Okay. Who does not know this stuff? Nobody. Okay. So I'm going to go through it very quickly. It's pretty obvious that in order to enter into a negotiation, you have to have done your own homework to know what you yourself are talking about, so that you can talk to an interested party with some authority. I've always found it important to be able to explain to the party not only the benefits of working with it, but what the holes and problems in the disclosure are. Okay? Because it's better for them to know that up front rather than for them to do the due diligence and tell you that there are problems with it that you hadn't anticipated and you're embarrassed. So you do your homework. Another key issue is sitting down with the researcher and talking through and explaining the process that you're going to go through. For many faculty, this is brand new stuff. When they meet someone they don't know, they tend to talk a lot. Okay? They tend to disclose everything, and that's not the situation you want. So sitting down and sorting out what their role is, which is explaining the technology briefly. This is not a 40-minute technical seminar that they're going to give, but a brief explanation that normally in negotiations with a company, I always set it up that I am the negotiator, the faculty member is a technical expert, and with the other team that comes, we identify rather quickly who their scientists are, so the researcher will deal with them, many times in a separate room. You start off together, there's a brief presentation, and then people separate out. Doing it that way causes a great deal of discomfort for my researcher. They want to know that you're not giving away his or her farm, okay? So talking through what the process is, what the likely terms are, what the interests of the company are up front before people get together is critically important. And I found that a rather critical element. Yeah. Also, while you're not sure what the numbers are, the terms of the arrangement are fairly standard, okay? You've either got a licensing template or a research collaboration agreement template, so there's some understanding so that the researcher understands what's in it for them. And then many times I will chat about potential numbers, and I don't like to, well, let's put it this way. I'm a little hesitant about putting out a term sheet and saying our expectations are A, B, and C, okay? What I rather do is brief scientific presentation, and then the two key questions are, one, what are you, the company, going to do with our technology, our research results? Period, full stop, and listen. Don't interrupt. Listen to what you hear. As I've told the advanced group, occasionally I was startled because the company saw applications that we didn't have a clue about. And to them it was quite important. In one other case, the company lead negotiator smiled and said, "You guys don't have a clue as to the importance of your stuff," which was a little patronizing, but on the other hand, he went on to explain the impact of our technology in terms of changes in the field and the market that the company was active in, okay? And we just sat there like, holy smoke. So if we had blurted out our terms are A, B, and C, the company would have smiled, listened, blabbed a bit, and then accepted the deal, and we would have been shortchanged big time. So engagement, discussion, listen as to how they're going to use it. Okay, that's quite straightforward. Nothing new about that. With Zoom or Teams, the negotiating stance changes substantially. And what I've found, it's always better to do some preliminary work and then get face-to-face, okay? And normally invite the company to come to your institution. What I found is when they come, they have a much fuller understanding of the capabilities, the unique equipment at the institution, the campus, and so they can really appreciate what's going on. I had one instance where there was a licensed conversation, and the company said, you took us on a little tour and I saw this piece of equipment over here. We'd like to engage in a contract to use that equipment to solve a problem that we've not talked about. So all of a sudden there was a research contract for a fixed sum of money. Something that if they had not seen the equipment wouldn't have happened. All right. They said visiting, touring always generates credibility, generates awareness and interest. And builds momentum to closing a deal. And 9 times out of 10, I've had people come to my campus and the deal's closed because they want access to what we're doing. All right. Always try and establish a social setting ahead of time. Greet someone as they arrive. If you are on a university, the biggest pain in the rear end is parking. So make sure that parking is easily available. I had chairman of a board I was on told me that there was absolutely no way he's going to come to my office because parking at the University of Calgary was just such a colossal pain that he wasn't going to. So parking, think about little things like that. Makes the visitor feel appreciated up front and quite comfortable quickly. Then you sit down. I put a little bit of an agenda up here. Say hello. Many times I've had the vice president of research come by and say hi. In my instance, that was the person who would sign the deal. Okay, so it was important to have that happen. Sit down, go back and forth, find out more about the company. The corporate people will be delighted to talk about their own corporation. You then explain the interests on the campus, a little bit about the laboratory, because that will begin to focus down on what you want to talk about. Again, ask why they're interested, what they're going to do with the technology, and then if it can be separate, you then separate out, the scientists go have a talk, the negotiators have a talk, and then if there's anything startling, your researcher and you need to hive off in the corner and explain that what they're interested in was more than just what we had thought they might be interested in. That's a bit of a surprise, so how do we handle that? But in most cases, it's quite straightforward. Break up into 2 groups. Once I've heard what it is they want to do with our technology, then we can put together and talk verbally about potential terms. Okay, here's the way that we do things. And you need to find out whether the company's dealt with many universities before. Okay, I had one instance where dealing with the university was brand new, and the company brought their lawyer who was all in a fit that this wasn't the way that the company did things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They had not done their homework. So you need to establish whether they're familiar with the typical way a university operates, which is bureaucratic and slow. You need to explain that to people, okay? The institutions do not move at the same pace that the corporations do. And the fact that corporations move fast is total fiction. Total fiction. Corporations, particularly larger ones, have the same bureaucracy and lethargy as your institution. Smaller corporations, okay, are ready to move faster, and you have to set the expectations. But once the expectations are set, the company feels, okay, we understand this is going to take a bit of time, who the key decision makers are and what the key issues are. I always present the broad terms. We then stop and talk about what on earth I'm talking about so people understand the words I've used, okay? For corporations that have dealt with universities before, it's no big deal. For those where it's new, there's a little bit of explanation. Then it's a case of, okay, we think we understand what's on the table. The question then becomes, what is next? The company leaves. Okay, who's going to follow up? What do the next steps look like? Will you send a piece of paper with the term sheet to initiate the conversation? You say you will within a week, within a couple of days. You then establish at which time you can phone them up and get some preliminary feedback. You go back and forth and try and establish a time frame. Now, in the office that I had, there were dozens of deals going on, conversations going on all the time. So your licensing manager has to be pretty alert, okay? And at that point, it is critically important that the professional support staff have a calendar of when to follow up. And that individual comes to you and says, in 2 days' time, you need to follow up because that's what you committed to. I always appreciated that to make sure that our office was seen as professional and met its deadlines. Okay, that's straightforward. Occasionally, the company's quite interested in a research collaboration, okay, to better understand the research results and begin to ask questions of how to turn the research results into a technology which they can then turn into a product. So if there's a research collaboration, putting the terms and the full budget on the table is appropriate. The term sheets go out, there's feedback, this is good. What do we do next? Well, what you do next is a more full legal agreement, okay? And you need to explain that this is kind of a standard agreement on behalf of the institution. And if you want to give us your template for a deal, thank you very much. That's very nice. I'll get back to you in 6 months' time. And people look at you startled and say, look, I'm going to have to send it to the corporate counsel, general counsel of the university. They're busy with land acquisition deals and everything else. By the time they get around to it, it's going to take time. So let's deal with our language, which, by the way, is typical of the university. I've had 2 instances in my career where I have suggested to the person, they phoned a friend of mine at another university close to where they are resident in their city, and I've made an introduction. I've said, look, go talk to my buddy. They'll tell you, I'm not going to be on the call. Go talk to them as to what's kind of typical, the time frames and the deal terms. And I've done that in order to move the whole thing along. And the company comes back and says, I appreciate having an independent view because I can go to the higher management of my company and tell them we've done some homework independently and heard the same thing from another prestigious institution. So this is a reasonable way to proceed. Helps get the deal done. Okay, well, before they leave, having some sort of little social event, either a meal is usually a good thing. You find out a bit more about the people you're going to be dealing with. I was asked in the advanced group, how do you have relationships with corporations over a period of time? And the answer is it's real hard, very hard. You will be confronted with a group of people representing the company at that moment in time. You and they will negotiate a deal. I've had instances where we've got it signed, there's a report due 6 months later, we phone up, we send a letter, then we phone the company, and the people we've dealt with have moved on, and they're new people. I had one instance where the company was sold. It was a new group of players. And that instance where, thank you very much, we bought the company, we're downsizing, changing the strategy, we're not interested in doing the deal. So it's like a marriage. I've been married 55 years to the same woman, okay? And constant communication on a regular basis of both good and bad things. I had one instance where my faculty member, idiot, didn't tell me they were going on sabbatical leave in 6 months' time. And it wasn't sabbatical elsewhere in the States, it was down in New Zealand. And this was showing my age here, an era before the internet. So being able to contact and keep in touch was incredibly difficult. So I was annoyed, to say the least. All right, you go through, it's always good to formalize, say the signing, have a little bit of a celebration, even if it is independent over the phone. And then I've always handed the deal to the professional support staff who go through it looking for the key deliverables. Usually reports due or royalties due are being paid, puts it into a calendar, and all the deals in the office are on the same calendar. So she went through it and was able to alert the relevant licensing manager to the fact that on this deal in a month's time, a report's due, so a very polite letter of reminder could go out well in advance to give the company a chance to pull things together and get back to us on time. That was the purpose of the calendar, which had all of our deals. That's it. Huge round of applause. Thank you very much. I'm here for the rest of the week. Are there any questions?
The audience.
Okay.
It is better to ask the company profile and their financial status to know that how they are capable to take up this technology during the negotiation part.
It depends on the size of the company. We did a deal with Bristol-Myers Squibb. Their financial statements were irrelevant. Okay, you knew they could do whatever they said they were going to do. For a startup, yes, it's pertinent, and it's a very good question to ask because twice I asked it and found they were fundraising, and having a deal signed would be a hard asset in the raise. So there was pressure on us and them to get it done fairly promptly. Okay. Sometimes it's a case where there's a conditional clause in the license dependent on their successfully closing the raise. Okay? If they were unsuccessful, the license was, well, it wasn't signed. Well, it was signed, but it wasn't effective. Okay? It became irrelevant because they didn't have the money to carry out their obligations. Does that answer the question? Yeah? Good. Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to have you for another 10 seconds. I've got something to tell you. Another question?
How do you put the deliverables for each and every agreement in a calendar? It's very difficult to track for each and every one. Or do you have a separate team?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
At the end, you said you put the deliverables for tracking in a calendar.
Yes.
Or you track it. So how do you do it? You get it done through a separate team or you do it?
Oh, I had a very small office. Did you all hear the question? How you do the calendar thing? I was incredibly fortunate in the 18 years I was at FSU. I had a very small office and one professional support staff. So, and I had two. Each of the women stayed for about 9 years. The answer is very simple. I'd give them the deal in paper with our standard format was she would know where to look for deadlines and milestones, and then would put it on an Excel spreadsheet or it was an Excel spreadsheet month by month by month by month, broken down by 2 weeks, okay? And so the name of the faculty member, the name of the technology, the disclosure number, license signed on this date, and then the milestones. Even if the milestone was 6 months out, she'd go February, March, April, May, June, boom, and go down and mark report due, okay? Nice and simple. So that every morning she'd look at the calendar and see what was coming up a month from now. And then send an email, alert, or text to the appropriate licensing manager, reminding you this deal has a report due. Do you want me to send a reminder letter? She would then, it was the standard letter, she'd then sign it and send it. If there was a lack of response, she would phone the company. I was a great believer in engagement of everybody in my office in every aspect of my office. Okay? So having her phone and establishing a relationship with the company whom she had met while they were here was important. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right. Now, anyone else? Okay. See what this is? You know what that is? Or this? Here. Pass this around. You know what it is? It's an example of successful technology transfer. For many years, anytime I gave a talk, I would walk into the room up front and I would put on the table, and many of you have seen this at STEM, put a bottle of Gatorade, a container of milk, a small vial of Taxol on the table, and ask the audience, what do these things have in common? If I was lucky, I had a basket of strawberries, okay? And people would kind of figure it out fairly quickly. It's an example of an invention that was the basis of a product in the marketplace through tech transfer. Bang. Instant awareness and the beginning of engagement so that people would listen to the rest of the story from me. Okay? I urge you, when you're talking to people, either having companies come or you're presenting what you're doing to higher management, to have something like that in your pocket. You pull it out and show it. Okay? I've had a much better response from the very senior management and board of trustees of my institution by starting the conversation with something like that. Instantly, people see this tech transfer stuff actually works. It does lead to products. Here it is. Okay. From that viewpoint, okay, they're willing to listen to the rest of what you talk to them about. As I told you, I think, my first encounter with a departmental presentation was, I'm here to tell you about patents and licenses. Whew. Lost them in 10 seconds flat. The next time I had a presentation, I came with things like this and said, I'm here to tell you how engagement with our activity will accelerate your research career. Boom. Silence. Tell me more. So, I've covered the topic. I wanted to show you these products as communication tools. And I urge you to go into meetings with something like this in your pocket. Might be a sheath of wheat. It might be a piece of asphalt or concrete that contains green materials, okay? But people will stare at it and look at you and say, what is this? And boom, instant engagement. So, I'm done. What these are, at Florida State University, we had a magnet laboratory that was the size of a small shopping center. There was parking for 200 cars, 3 cooling towers, a third the size of the nuclear reactor cooling towers. Okay, this is a big operation. There was a microscopist who took pictures of things under the microscope. Some of his images showed up on the front page of Nature and Science over the years. He was fooling around one day and started taking pictures of mixed drinks under the microscope. Froze them, polarized light, got all sorts of weird, beautiful colors like on the top of these coasters. Okay? And he came to me one day, and all of a sudden I realized there's creativity in unexpected corners of the campus. All right? So he, Michael Davidson, found ultimately a necktie company that used to sell ties that had the artwork of Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead on the tie. Jerry passed, his wife canceled the license, and Irwin was looking for a replacement. Our guy walks in and says, mixed drinks. Oh, I love it. 2.5% royalty. Over 10 years, $1 million in royalties accrued. Okay? And who would have thought? Okay? Then an entrepreneur who had gone to Berkeley, moved back to Tallahassee, came to me and said, I want to start a small company. What do you got? So we talked about a number of things. I showed him Michael's ties. He talked to the researcher, and they agreed that he would have a license to all of the images, which are on, they're still on the website at the Mag Lab, and turn them into coasters, artwork, women's silk scarves, okay, and a variety of products like that. Went to trade shows, started selling, and he sold the business. So the lesson to me was, you'll find creativity very interesting places. And so when I was president of Autumn, I went to 2 of the meetings as incoming and then president, and brought 2,000 neckties and made sure that each registrant had a necktie. And I stood up and told the audience, look, I'm giving these to you not to look better and wear the tie, but to be able to have a story to express the creativity of university people. Bang. This is really, really interesting. Did you have to talk about the science and orbitals and blah, blah, blah? No. Instantly understandable. Very powerful. So I leave you with the lesson. Have one of the products of a successful deal in your back pocket, or a picture of it if it's too big, of course, and put it on the table to begin the conversation of talking to a company interested in another technology, or when your boss says, what are you doing for me today? At budget time, you've got something to talk about. So if I could have those back, please, and I'm done, because they're the last copies.
Of the coasters. Is it? Can I have a look?
Well, maybe, yeah. Sure. Thank you very much.
Quick question from.
Sure.
And then
So,
to Richard after.
in that example, you said that you were having several rounds of negotiations and suddenly the other partner backed off, right? So, what to do in those instances after losing so many resources, time, money, efforts, and everything?
There's a scientific term for that. The initials are SOL. Do you know what that means? No. You are, quote, out of luck. That's it. Totally out of your hands. The other party, for reasons you may or may not understand, had to back away. If you're lucky, you'll be given the courtesy of a call explaining what's going on.
Yeah.
But again, there's nothing you can do. So you thank them politely. You make absolutely sure you are diplomatically polite, because it may be in 2 years' time, someone in the company comes back and remembers, okay, and is able to do something. So if it doesn't work out, I've had deals where I had a deal where we were about to sign and the company got bought. And I got a phone call. Sorry, the market opportunity, the product we were going to license is so small that the purchaser of our business thinks is too small to be interesting, they're not going to sign the deal. Okay. You can do nothing about it except go cry in the corner, but be very polite. And then explain to the researcher and others that sometimes the deals just don't work out. Okay? Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can
You're
I
up.
have the mic?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning. I wonder why you guys are listening to me so intently, you know?
They're just being polite, Dick.
Well, I'd like to think that it's because I bring some wisdom. And I don't know, do you know what wisdom is? Well, I didn't really know what wisdom was. I've since seen it. You know, sometimes you'll just hear it. I have a colleague he's over 90 years old. He's a good scientist, and that guy's got some wisdom. You know, at 90, and he's still thinking and working and acting. You know, he's got some wisdom. So what is wisdom? Well, I heard a quote not too long ago that said, wisdom is not having to make the same mistake again, right? So when you've been doing this as long as I have, IP Techtransfer, and as many deals that have flown through and as many interactions with as many inventors, you make mistakes, right? And hopefully you learn from those mistakes and you move on. And I'm here today, my topic is to cover post-deal contract life cycle management. What do you do after the deal is signed? You know, hey, the good problem, you know, and we got the deal done, we've signed, and I'm going to tell you about a mistake that we made, and was one of those mistakes that I kind of liken it to flying in a plane. You're in a small plane, and it's all cloudy. You're riding there with the pilot, and it's just cloudy. You don't see, and all of a sudden the clouds part, and there's a mountain right in front of you, and the pilot pulls up like this, and you go, and you just barely make it. And that's kind of the way it was. So it you know, it still makes my heart beat a little bit faster when I think about this. And so this is a cautionary tale in part to, you know, don't forget this part of the tech transfer process. And hopefully by the time I'm done, you'll go, yeah, okay, this is important. Let me ask you this. Do you have an existing system, process? John mentioned they have a system for taking the deal that was signed and somehow putting it into a tool that can be then used to systematize. Do you guys have such a system yet? Raise your hand. No. Okay. And that's typical. And so I hope you're going to walk out of here and going, okay, now I know what I need to do when I go back to my office. I'll talk a little bit about how to do it. But here's the story. Here's that little plane flying and the scary story. Do we like horror stories? You know? Okay, here's one. So, rapid growth in the number of licenses signed. So in 1990, we were doing about 35 licenses a year. And within 10 years, we were up to 100 a year. So the number of licenses was just skyrocketing. And what a big success. I mean, my boss was really happy, inventors happy, all good, all systems go. I felt like I was really doing my job, running a well-oiled machine of these tech transfer professionals and our staff. Everybody was pretty happy and doing a great job. The situation, though, was that in these earlier days, we had one person to watch over this. Sounds like it's like John's office. You have one person, they're competent, and they use the systems they're used to. In our case, she would use paper. Remember that? Oh, here's some. Yeah, paper. And it was written down, and she could print it out. When I first started at Cornell, I asked my boss at the time, I said, hey, would you buy me a laptop? And he goes, you don't need a laptop in this job. I'm like, okay, well, maybe he'll catch up eventually. He never did. He never used a computer, ever. So this person in our staff who was responsible for monitoring signed agreements, it was fine. At least we thought so. She used the paper system, as I said, and then as we got more agreements, hey, this new technology called spreadsheets. Remember Excel? When Excel first came out? Wow. Revolutionized our data management. And so she learned Excel and started to put all this information in as much as she could. So all good. I felt very comfortable. We're moving along, everything good. But what we didn't know, it's kind of like, gosh, there's all kinds of things. Maybe in our houses, we have a house and there's a water leak and you're not aware of it until all of a sudden you're there and you're like, huh? What's this? And you realize, wait a minute. Uh-oh, what's going on? And then you run upstairs, you realize the pipe's broken. Well, the pipe was broken. We didn't know that until the leak became apparent. There wasn't anyone who was regularly reviewing compliance. And as we found out, some of this is like, you're of course seeing the analysis, the results of finding out like, what's going on? I walk into the office, going to have a good day. I got my usual problems and issues and things I'm going to work on. And then suddenly this leak. And I'm like, what does it, and as you start to realize what's going on, you realize the problem's bigger than you realized. And eventually, I got to the point where we realized that some licenses had been signed and put into a file, and nobody looked at it for 8 years. So how did we find this? Well, we had some inventors who said, I'm not getting this inventor had stayed in touch with the licensee and knew the licensee was selling, but he wasn't receiving sufficient royalty reports. And so he was the one that noticed, well, something's wrong here because I know they're selling and I'm not getting as much royalty share as I should. That's what caused us to go in and go, oh, wait a minute. We haven't been reviewing this, and one of the things we realized is some of these licenses, they had obligations to pay us, or at least to report to us, and they never had, and we'd never contacted them. And so we had a number of these, and I remember picking up the phone to talk to a licensee that we hadn't been in touch with for 8 years. And I introduced myself. I didn't even do the deal. I introduced myself, director, hey, we've got a problem. It was such a big problem that I thought I better do it. And I said, Cornell University Techtransfer office, and we've got a little bit of a problem. And they said, well, what's that? And I go, well, you owe 8 years of back payments. And number one, they were very unhappy. And they were very unhappy with us. I couldn't disagree with them. Now, in a way, one could say that, well, they had a responsibility too. The obligation was on them. So they neglected it, but so did we. And he turned around and he pointed a finger at me. He said, well, if you had an operation that knew what it was doing, this problem wouldn't have occurred. And I had to agree with him. And as we started to look into it, we realized the problem was more comprehensive and systematic than we realized. We realized what a poor system, as I started to evaluate what a poor system we really had. We had a really good system for negotiating those deals, for doing all the right work in terms of the right kind of license, language, terms, conditions, with some little bit of tweaks, which I'm going to talk about here. But we had this problem. We were not managing our agreements. And obviously we needed to step back, and the more you look at it, the more you realize, oh, this is a bigger problem, right? There are a number of aspects to this that you need to step back. You don't just fix this. You don't just call up that licensee and go, okay, let's come up with a deal. You're not going to pay us the 8 years worth? Well, would you pay us 4, to deal with that particular problem? It's bigger than that. You got to step back and go, okay, we got to fix the system. So that's what I began to contemplate. And I think you can see this problem and what it presented for me and why it was so scary and why I was in that little plane that barely missed slamming into the wall of that mountain. Lack of attention by us results in a lack of attention by the licensee. If we didn't get in touch with them, they're off doing their thing, and as you start realizing what they do the very same thing we did, which is the people that negotiated the deal and signed the agreement, then hand it off to somebody else who puts it in a file folder, and everybody forgets about it. They go about their thing, I go on to the next deal, so it's forgotten. And that lack of attention causes all these things. As I said, missed payments, and there were many. I mean, when we finally did the totals, we were owed something around $1.5 to $2 million that were accounts payable that we were doing nothing about. That doesn't sound good, does it? Their licensees were we were neglecting to collect and pay royalties, and guess who doesn't like that? I mean, everyone doesn't like it, but particularly the inventors, they were the ones, and some of them were angry. And they missed their milestones, there's unreported failure to comply, they're out of compliance, and it's a failure of diligence. And whose failure is it? It's their failure, but it's our failure not to monitor that. So what this means then is, yeah, you did a great deal in negotiating that deal, everything's great, but look at all this failure. It's a failure of tech transfer. And this, and my boss, who was he was a good guy to work with. He was a Nobel laureate, so kind of a smart guy. And, but I just felt so, what's the word? Embarrassed is one word. Just ashamed that I thought my capabilities were more than this. And yeah, like I said, I'm really wise now because I had to go through this process, not pleasant. And one of the things here is, don't let this happen to you, okay? Unhappy inventors and administrators, and do you think some people had suggested that maybe we should find new management? Oh, yeah. Basically an overall failure to steward the technology. It's like at some point we're steering this ship and we got our hand on the rudder, and at some point we just kind of go, yeah, my job's done, and let the rudder flap around, and who knows what's going to happen. So really bad. So here's this great tech transfer office, and boy, did we look good. We had nice facilities, we had good technology, we had licensees, and we were just a failure, I have to say, and embarrassing. So what are you going to do? We got to step back. I looked at it systematically. Fortunately, I had good people who we could sit around the table and go, okay, team, we got to fix this. It's got to be comprehensive. We got to spend the resources, time, money, tools. So what we did was obviously accepted the importance of it, right? This is, is it job one? Well, maybe at this point it was. We got a fire. And, you know, when you got a fire, you got to put it out. So we started working on it ASAP, and we started this systematic approach with a process and a system. And that's what you got to do. And if you don't have a system now, the bad news is you don't have a system now. But the good news is now you can create one. And create one that, from scratch, it's a whole lot easier than just kind of letting it happen by accident. So start now when you're small in the sense of deals, the number of deals. And maybe you don't have to be like we had so many by the time I left. We had so many deals. We just had to implement this system at a very effective level just to keep our head above water, right? And also then to get even better than that. So don't wait until your numbers are high. Start as soon as you can. When you start looking at this, you realize that, as I said, you really need a comprehensive approach, and you realize that your license agreements can be easier, can be designed. Remember, we talked about you as designers. So one of the things you want to design for is the ease of monitoring it. And so I had to begin to get sensitize myself, as well as the rest of the tech managers, that when they were designing the license agreement, to not only think about the licensee-licensor negotiation, but also to think about the people that had to interpret, monitor, manage the contracts, my contract team. And so you start to go, oh, I can improve the license agreement provisions, and I can do some things that make it easier to monitor. For example, milestones. Now, I think you heard me talk about putting in milestone payments. I love them. I think they're fantastic because they help that balance of risk and value capture. They need to be monitored. And the milestones that I really love are event-based. Those are the ones that I think more effectively balance the risk and the value for the licensee-licensor. The problem is they're harder to monitor. Time-based are so much easier. I love time-based just for that reason alone. So I'm a little bit of two minds about that. So I'll do both. But you do have to kind of get a system that allows you to do things like, well, if there's an event-based, then you need to have a flag in which you will then go out and query the licensee. Now you see some other things here. We put in provisions that puts a lot of burden on them to report regularly, and if they don't, they're out of compliance. So we made it really strict. You've got to report, and you got to report on a certain time frame. So we started putting in these things that make it a lot easier to put into that spreadsheet, that flag, the requirements, so we know how then to look for them and to manage them. Also auditing, one of the things that we found was that licensees, they vary in terms of their ability, their capability to keep accurate records of their sales, their economic activity with your technology, and therefore the royalties owed. Some were better than others. And so we realized that we need to do several things there. One was to tell everybody and say, we're not singling you out, licensee, but we do this to everybody. And that is, there's a provision here that says we retain the right to have random audits. At any time, we'll give you 5-day notice, 5 business day notice, and then you have to be prepared for a professional audit. And so we just put, the fear of a fear of God in their hearts that, okay, we could be audited anytime, so we got to ratchet up our own systems, our internal systems. And we also did audits, and that's another subject. And we found that, and I've talked to my colleagues who've done audits, and what we found is that about half the time, if you audit and you'd never audit a real small deal, but if you have a lot of activity, you audit them, and I don't do it lightly because it's expensive. But we found that about half the time, the audits show everything's fine. And the other half, it shows we have a problem, and it's usually in their favor, not in ours. And sometimes it can be a rather large discrepancy. It doesn't happen all that often, but it does. So, yeah?
Typically, how long these audits will go on?
Oh, they might take, so, yeah, how long does the audit process last? Well, in our experience, we didn't do that many. I remember about 3 of them, and they would have sort of some stages. The first stage was, give us all your information, and then we would actually send an auditor, a professional auditor that we hired, to go visit, to sit down with the data and go through and meet people and look them in the eye. And so there was that fact gathering, and then there was a report by the auditor given to us. That would take about a month. Yeah, something like that. We always put in a provision that says that if we do an audit, and after the audit is done, if we discover a discrepancy in your favor greater than, I can't remember what the threshold was, but greater than a certain amount, or a percentage of what should have been reported, then you have to pay for the audit. Okay? A little bit of a penalty there. Again, to ratchet up their awareness, okay, for one thing, and their diligence. As I said, agreements should contain provisions that make systematic monitoring feasible. John talked about how when an agreement was signed, you had someone who put it into a system, right? In some kind of a calendar, to use John's term, that allowed the person managing it to see what was due, when, okay? So that's an approach, and it's a kind of an element of what I'm talking about here. We needed to have a system that allowed us to see what was due in any particular month. Here are the reports due, the milestone payments due, all the things that are due in a time frame. We required regular reports. So this idea that 8 years of no reporting, well, it's explicit. You will report, and if you don't report on a annual or biannual basis, it's subject to termination. Now, again, we had to fix our system, but they needed to improve their reporting. One of the things we also realized is that people would report their royalties in all kinds of ways. They'd take we had people who were like farmers, so sometimes farmers don't sit down and do a really nice spreadsheet, they just scratch it out, not to denigrate farmers, but, other people would do it too, they'd send us reports that we could not read or understand. And so finally, I think John mentioned this, you tell them how to report it. And we got to the point where it was just routine that we would show them how to report, and it would be attached to the license agreement. Here's the way you'll report your sales and royalty calculations, et cetera. Make it real easy for them. I'm also going to talk about the handoff. The person who negotiates the deal, like in my case, if I negotiate that deal, I know it really well. We just got through designing that license fee, royalty, milestone. I know it so well. Now what I got to do is transfer that to my contract management team. So we developed a handoff system. So you can see there we made the form required milestone events clearly described. As part of our process, one of the things we did was after the license was signed, our contract management team would send a welcome letter, a welcome to being a Cornell licensee. Da, 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 da. We're so happy to have you as a Cornell licensee. You can go tell the world you're one of our preferred partners. And we just want to make sure, let's be on the same page. I've put together a little, let's call it kind of like a term sheet. Here are the terms of the agreement that you signed, that we signed, and just want to make sure you're aware of that. And so we make it very clear. So we don't leave it to chance that they know. Okay. So we would have this handoff process where after I signed it, my contract team would come in and ask me to, I had to kind of fill it. They'd sort of fill it out, and then I'd edit it and go, okay, that's fine, great. So a lot of scrutiny and care. Like when you almost slammed into that mountain wall, you're like, okay, never again. I'm not going to go through this ever again. And I don't want any of you to ever go through it again. So sometimes does it feel like a little overkill? And you guys, so I had so many licenses that were flowing through that we had to do it at this level. I think if you're not doing that many, of course you can dial it down a little bit. Nonetheless, give it care. So you put a lot of burden of reporting of event-based. That's the other thing too. You don't know if and when they have achieved an event-based milestone. First successful field trial. So you have to put the burden on them in the license agreement. They have to do that, and they have to do it in a timely fashion. Now, you should have these regular letters that go out. That's the other thing. We would send out a letter to our licensees on a regular basis. So we always stayed in touch with them, and we would remind them, you have a milestone, event-based milestone. Please tell us as soon as that has been satisfied. I mentioned this, a standard license reporting form. We have it in our license as an attachment. And it just, it's so much better, so much easier for your contract team to manage than if you have that standard form. So we developed this warning system in which there were certain flags like, oh, they haven't reported, or there's some issue with their royalties haven't hit a minimum annual royalty. There's some problems, and your contract monitors are the first ones to see it. And so we had this system where there was a yellow flag, and the yellow flag was, I think we have a problem. And one of the things we learned, we say a stitch in time saves 9, right? So you got a little bit of a problem, fix it now before it grows into a big problem. So using that analogy, we would say, okay, maybe we have a problem, and our contract management people would then go to the tech manager who negotiated and go, I think we have a problem on this license. And the tech manager go, oh, yeah, okay, let me look into it, or yeah, I know what's going on, or yeah, I'll make a call. And that eliminated 90% of the problems. Oh, whoops, that's a mistake. A lot of this is just human forgetfulness or an error or a little glitch. It's not a big problem. So we would cure most of our problems here. Ultimately, you want to have this comprehensive database system. Now, in the advanced group that we met with in the last couple of days, the question went out, is there a preferred database system for tech transfer offices? And our answer was, we don't know for sure. We know of some systems. We talked about a system we know in the US because they've kind of evolved. We've watched them. They're members of Autumn. It's called Intium. And I've heard reasonably good things about them. Any of you have a system? I guess you don't, right? Okay. And I don't know if there is a preferred system in India. My recommendation is that I suggested STEM. Any STEM members here? STEM members, one. I recommend you join STEM if you're going to be in this profession. You guys should all develop the professional community. Anyway, I recommend that STEM go do a little bit of homework and see if you can find that ideal system, if there is such a thing for the Indian system. Intium is one. John, did you have one that you mentioned? Okay. I'm sorry, John? When I created the start of the office at FSU, I bought the Intium system. It was in the days before it was internet active. What I found was the administration of keeping the database up to date was very burdensome. And it was a little clunky. Now, I've known the founder of Intium for about 25 years. It's much better. What did we do? I paid $10,000. We tried it out. Then we set it aside and stopped using it. We then implemented a simple Excel spreadsheet. Okay? And everybody had access to the spreadsheet. We used it at staff meetings so people were familiar with it. It became the tool of communication inside the office. So even though it wasn't very sophisticated, it got embedded in how we did business. And it worked out just fine. Fact, unlike Dick, we did only 12 licenses a year. We did maybe 3 or 4 spinouts a year. So the volume was quite modest, and the Excel worked just fine. So that was my experience. And so I think if you have an office where you have a throughput more like John's, then I think you can probably do just fine with standard tools, Excel spreadsheet, for example, and someone who's competent to know how to, organize, manage, and that sort of thing. And maybe just come up with your own tailored way to do things like, how do you flag potential problems? How do you regularly review? How do you take, here's one of the key things, I guess, is take the information. These license agreements are legal documents, and they're, 10, 15, sometimes more pages. And the real nuggets that you need are scattered around in there. It's like the term sheet, right? How do you extract that information out and put it in a form that makes it easy to access going forward? Because you don't want to every time have to come in and go wade through all that and use your highlighter. So however you do it, just do it. This is a key thing. Oh, you have to report. We found that licensees said, well, I don't know anything, so why would I report? And reporting 0 is important. We needed to know, especially, this isn't why we do it, this is one of the reasons, that when they report 0 royalty owed, I presume that means they had no sales, right? That wasn't always the case, and sometimes, now, I'll be honest, we were not so capable as to go out and investigate their sales. We don't have the time for that. But our inventors would often kind of keep track. And they would contact me and say, I know they're selling, but I'm not getting any royalties. Okay, therein lies a problem. So I want to see reports, and some, that would be another thing. You've got a report, and I would say, okay, I want to see the royalty report amounts, the total royalties for this license over the last 5 years. Yeah, it's ... 0. What? That's a problem. That's a yellow flag. Why did it drop down to 0? So we certainly had that kind of information, and that would prompt me, I'd say to the tech manager and negotiator, what's going on with them? Why did they drop to 0? And the tech manager would say, well, I know why. It's because X, Y, Z. Okay. Or they would say, I don't know. I go, well, find out. So we're proactive managers of the license. Monitoring exclusive licensees is another reason why I know you guys aren't totally enamored with exclusive licenses like I am. But I'll give you another reason why I like exclusive licenses, because I can put so much of a burden on them to report. And we were talking about sub-licensing last night, and that's another thing. Your exclusive licensee can have a number of sub-licenses, and they're responsible for making sure the sub-licensees report. But if you do non-exclusives, guess who has to monitor all that? Yeah, you and your office. And I know because we did non-exclusive licenses routinely for our plant varieties, oftentimes in the US. And I would have one plant variety that would have 25, 30 licenses, and each one that needs to be monitored, that starts to add up when you get how many different varieties. So that's a problem, and that's another reason, yet one more reason why I like exclusive licenses, because your exclusive licensee, especially if it's in another country. I think I told you, I never did and I never would license non-exclusively in India. If I'm in Ithaca, New York, I'm not going to license, because I'm not here, I don't know India. So I want an exclusive licensee who will then look out for our interests and also do all the reporting and auditing and et cetera. I mentioned this random audit provisions. I also mentioned that time-based milestones are easier, even though I love event-based because of that risk balancing. So I'll use both. It just kind of depends upon the situation. I wouldn't hesitate. I like event-based, and I would encourage you in your negotiations to use event-based. I think it's a very powerful tool. You're going to have a staff, or someone's got to take responsibility for this, the day in and day out management of your licenses. And you can see that when we started in 1990, we had 1.5 full-time employees managing 200 licenses, and by 2015 there were 5 managing 2,000 licenses. And the way we could do it is time to wrap up.
10 minutes?
Yeah. Oh, sure. And we did it with tools. You can see we spent time, dedicated time, not only to have the motivation, but to sit down and build a system of the human system, of the handoffs, the tools to flag and to put all of it in a form that would show the contract managers what was going on, and then me as director identifying problems. So just a little bit about license contract problems, because you'll probably, if you're successful, you'll probably have some problems. So here's the way we handle it. And we did have problems. We had a variety of problems over the years. Contract breaches, lack of compliance. And so we had this phase system for managing the problems. And I say they were phased in intensity and legality. So they would kind of, ratchet up in terms of this intensity. So if we flag a problem, hey, we got a problem, and I would tell the tech manager, just go check it out, or sometimes the contract manager, go check it out. and, oh, we have a problem, what's going on? And the licensee says, oh, you know, we had a fire in our warehouse, we have this and that. And if they have a real problem, we're good partners. Okay, all right, we understand. We'll put notes in. You know, we want to be good partners. And so we are flexible and we're compassionate and within reason. So we solve most of our problems informally, checking in the key contacts, making sure that we're solving these problems. All done pretty informally and friendly. We may have, if it's a failure to report, we have in the license agreement provisions that if there's a breach of the contract, we notify them, and we notify them using, certified mail, so they can't say, well, we never got it. So they get it, and they have a certain cure period. Your license agreements have a cure period, gives them 30 days, 60 days to fix the problem to your satisfaction. So there might be an initial notification. This is just kind of a formality, and it's friendly. Again, the tech manager might call and just check in what's going on and come up with a resolution pathway. But then the tech manager and the contract team say, okay, boss, we got a problem. Like, okay, what's going on? They haven't reported their milestones. They're ignoring us. What do? I will send them a letter. Our letterhead, my name. Now they know it's been elevated to a higher level. Still relatively friendly. We're good partners. Please contact me. Let's resolve this. That doesn't work. And this is where you have good partnership with your legal office, okay? Okay, Jane, you got to get that letter ready. And so the letter comes out and says, we're Cornell's legal office. We understand you're a licensee, and they've contacted you. No report. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to. How are we going to fix this? And then, if they don't fix it, then they get a second letter, which is like, okay, it's going to get serious. Next thing you hear from us will be from, it'll be the start of litigation, okay? And the whole time you're weighing the costs and benefits. We didn't like to take legal action, but we did when we had to. A big office like ours, occasionally, you have to do things like contract compliance, enforcement, or also infringement. That's another thing. That's not really contract management as much as it is, how to deal with a potential infringer. Probably a subject for another day. But most 98% fixed by this point. Not very many here. And when you're here, and we did do some litigations once in a while. Yeah, because once you terminate the license, they're now an infringer, and it changes everything. It's not just contract breach. Now it's infringement. Now it's federal court as well as civil court. So in our country, are you going to engage an outside lawyer? Someday when you're ready, let's talk about infringement management, and how do you do that? It's exciting. Oh, yes, and it's not for the faint of heart. Final comments. Nothing is more important. I guess I scared you. I scared you that don't let this happen to you. It's important to the director's job. Develop a system now, regardless of the number that you have. I think some kind of, if it's just an Excel spreadsheet, that's fine, with a system for flagging and reminders, and then proactive reporting by the licensee, and then link provisions of the agreement in the database. And then this handoff turned out to be really important. The negotiator, the tech manager, sits down with the contract people. And you know what? We didn't really like to do it because, boy, when you're a tech manager and you've just negotiated that good deal, you want to move on to the next one. So you have to kind of discipline yourself and go, okay. You got to take this serious and just spend a few minutes on the contract, make sure it gets implemented into the contract management system. Make regular contact with all licensees. Have a dedicated person for each party responsible for communications. Regular meeting provisions if it's a big exclusive license. You're going to have happy customers, licensees and inventors. increased and reliable revenue. Boy, I haven't going to go through the numbers here, but boy, did this improve our operation in terms of our financials. And my boss was happy, and so were the deans. And I kept my job, and people went, wow, you know, big problem, he fixed it. Okay. And we got a good reputation on campus. But it wasn't easy. So, okay, I think that's, oh, yes. This is my shameless advertisement. I teach a course online through Cornell's online arm called eCornell. And it's a 6-module online course, and you get a Cornell certificate. So,
What's the price?
it's not cheap. It's about $3,500 for all six modules. But you don't have to take all 6 modules. You can see the modules, and you may go, oh, I just want that one. I can't remember what it is per, you know, per module. $600, $500, something like that. I can't remember. But anyway, you can select and say, I want this one or that one. But you have to take all 6 if you want that Cornell certificate. And it's got all of my years distilled down into these 6 modules. Okay.
Any concession for this batch?
Nice ask. Let me think about that. I'll get in touch with the eCornell people. Okay. Now what?
Yeah,
Oh,
I have a
questions.
couple of questions. One.
As a director, you have several jobs. Like you have to keep yourself apprised about what is new in the market, how technologies or how the trends are there. You have to keep in touch with inventors. You have to design the agreements as well as the administration of the follow-ups. So how much time do you devote to tentatively each activity, particularly to keep yourself apprised about the new inventions, new things, and particular inventors and the potential buyers also?
That's a good question. Of all these activities, you know, how did I allocate my time? I guess, and this is me, which is I'm most interested in the invention and the inventors. And to me, that's like this wellspring. You know, it's the spring that keeps bubbling, and it's the flow. And so that to me, I was an inventor, and so I kind of relate to that. So that's where I would focus probably a lot of like, let's make sure that system is working as well as it possibly can. How much time would I spend on that? I mean, that would probably be, 30% of my time. But I had all these other things. That's the thing about being a university administrator. I had a lot of political stuff to do too, like just, satisfying this dean and that dean. So there's the political overhead that I had to invest in. I hire good people. That's the other thing, is that I realized that this system can all work well if you hire the right people. And it isn't as much their technical skills. That's important, of course, but what's really important is their attitude. So I started to realize I hired the wrong tech manager at one point and realized, this is a bad fit. And then I realized, how do I find the right people? So I started bringing the right people in. And with the contract management, I hired a guy who was just so good, and his number 2 was an airline pilot. So between them, boy, did they know how to manage the airplane analogy. They knew how to fly the plane. So a lot of it was me delegating, right, to them. Hire good people, get out of their way, and then just be really good at monitoring, watching the system go. But so for me, I think I spent the majority of my time in that invention. Let's make sure invention and inventors, we handle invention disclosures really well. But I also spent a fair amount of time making sure, we spent a lot of time managing our IP costs, because that's where I realized the tech transfer office expenses could be up here or something more reasonable, and the difference was our patent costs. Because if you don't watch over your patent counsel, because we always used outside lawyers, if you don't watch over it, what happens to expenses? It goes like this. So we really had to focus on that. And my boss, when I first started at Cornell, was a patent lawyer, and he said, okay, I know how patent lawyers work. So here's how we manage patent cost. So that was always something, and we developed systems. When you became a Cornell patent outside lawyer, you will follow these rules. Now the lawyers are like, well, we don't follow any rules. You will follow up. Do you want to get work from Cornell? Then here are the rules. They were reasonable, but they kind of kept a lid on the expenses. So really care about IP management and cost, and inventions, inventors, and I guess last but not least, wow, tech marketing. I always wanted to make sure all my tech managers were like moving all the time. What are you doing today as far as pushing your technologies creatively, proactively? I don't know how I did all that. So, but boy, when it came around, I'll tell you, when it came around, I don't know, 5 o'clock, I start turning it off. I had kids at home, and I got to remember, you got to keep this thing moving along and doing, as a fine instrument, you need to know when to turn it off and how to tune it out. And so I tried to do that as well. So.
Yeah.
I'm just going to allow one question. Rest will take over tea.
Okay. Once we do an exclusive license, who will take care of the infringement suits later?
Who will take care of the what?
Infringement suits. Like if there is an infringement,
yeah.
who will take care of that? And I'll add one more question to that. If there are any damages that we are receiving because of those infringement suits, will we share the damages also with the licensee?
The damages?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the question is, you got an exclusive license and there's an infringement by a third party. Really good question. So what we do is, it's a bit nuanced. So we say, number one, both parties, licensor, licensee, will keep each other informed on a very timely basis of any possible infringement. If we see something, we tell each other, okay, and we agree to collaborate on determining whether or not is this really infringement? Is it significant? And if so, the parties agree to take cooperative action. And what does that mean? It means that we retain a certain level of control over the disposition of our patents. So you'd have to read the language to see that at some level we retain a certain amount of, let's call it veto power, okay? But we also say, we basically do it together. But the costs of the infringement is all on them. We are willing to put in, if you need witnesses, our witnesses are me or my team or the inventor, we will cover those expenses. But the cost of the litigation, the lawyers, that's on our exclusive licensee. So damages. First of all, one thing we will do is we will say during the litigation, we will waive the royalties. Okay, so if you're paying for the litigation, we're not going to charge you royalties, so we suspend that. It seems like the right thing to do. And then damages, we do keep track of that. We say you got to keep track of it. You don't have to pay it until there's damages. If we win, if the two parties, the licensee, licensor, win in court, there's damages, which is that revenue that comes from the case. The first thing we get, well, they get to recover their out-of-pocket legal expense, and we get to recover our lost royalties. After that, 50-50.